In an era where marketplaces are proliferating, establishing a robust trust and safety program is incredibly crucial. I don't feel like I can overstate how crucial it is. And Drew Fowler is here today to discuss his journey and some insights that he has on how he transformed Avail's trust and safety program, how we can focus on the right metrics, build the right team, and manage vendors effectively. So really excited for this conversation. Drew is the head of trust and safety at Avail, and he joined just about a year ago now, right? In June of 2022. And your mission was to kind of overhaul the trust and safety sector of Avail. And you actually have a really interesting background in law enforcement, and you've got a lot of unique things to say. I was really impressed in our pre-interview, just the amount of insights I was getting in a 10-minute span. So I'm really excited to get some of those out for the rest of the listeners. But man, it's been an incredible journey for you. Any comments there on what that's been like so far, the first year at Avail?
Yeah, I think I'm coming up on my first year here in the next few days. So like the anniversary is coming up, and fun story. So when I joined Avail Car Sharing, in my very first week, like day one, I was actually traveling to Chicago for their first ever all hands, which is a brilliant way to get intro to the company. But at the time, risk and loss was really kind of eating into Avail. You know, it was causing a lot of problems. And so we're sitting in this all hands, and various directors from across the organization are giving presentations, and every single director brought up, you know, we got to get risk and loss under control. We got to get risk and loss under control. And I'm sitting there kind of shrinking in my seat, realizing this is what I was brought in to do. And every single director, every single CEO, and even the VP made a guest appearance and was like, we got to get risk and loss under control, which in one sense was great. Star of the show, star of my own show, but was also very intimidating because there was a lot that needed to get done. We had some systematic issues that needed addressing. Some were already starting to get addressed, but we had a long ways to go, and we've had a really good success and a great path on that road.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's been really successful looking at some of the stuff you've been able to do in the last year. I mean, it's been a lot. And maybe a good foundational place for us to start before we dig into some of those specifics is I'd love to hear why this is something that you were passionate about, what brought you into Avail. And specifically, I know you have this background in law enforcement. I'd love to hear how that impacted your career transition and to trust and safety.
Yeah, you know, there's this like common thread between trust and safety and law enforcement, and to define it simply, it's, you know, the buck stops here. When something goes wrong, it is trust and safety that jumps in, and we may not be the ultimate solvers. You know, we may be help solutioning with engineering or with marketing or with sales, but we are the ultimate problem solver. There's no one behind us that we get to punt a problem off to. And it's the same thing in law enforcement. Like, I remember as a brand new officer showing up to a call with him, like, there's got to be someone else. It's you. Like, you're the guy or the gal or the person that is there to solve the problem. And that sort of extreme ownership of like, this is me, here am I, send me, like, I'm ready to go solve this problem, translates well from law enforcement into trust and safety. Like, you're not waiting for someone to come save the day. It's up to you. And you may not be Superman, you may not be the hero, but you can drive solutions, you can drive progress. So maybe you've heard the joke, like, any exercise done poorly enough becomes a low back exercise. Any problem that persists inside of an organization typically waterfalls and eventually becomes a trust and safety problem, whether it's, you know, engineering or marketing or sales. Like, if the problem goes on long enough, it eventually becomes a trust and safety problem, which is one of the challenges and one of the most fun parts about trust and safety. Is I get to dabble in all sorts of different parts of the business. I get to learn a lot. It's really helped increase my business acumen at an accelerated level because I get to work with product. I get to work with the sales teams. I get to work with operations and OSHA, and like the scope and sprawl is so big, it really makes you have to be open to new ideas and moving quickly.
Yeah, that's really good. I'd love to dig into some of the foundational things that you have thought about as you've come into Avail as well. I know one of those things that you mentioned before is having the right metrics
Mm.
and how kind of shifting your focus to the right metrics. Really, I think the idea is metrics are your standard. They're what you're shooting for. If you have wrong metrics, you're going to end up moving toward the wrong thing. And so I'd love to hear from you about why you believe it's important, especially within trust and safety, to be focusing on the right things, and possibly what would those metrics be for you? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so I'm gonna break this question up into a couple, like, two parts mainly. It's like, first, your leading and your lagging indicators. So for us, the big thing that was kind of hurting us was our risk and our loss. And a lot of that loss, monetary loss, is tied up in our insurance cost. So we're a car sharing company. People go out, and even the most well-meaning person, sometimes they get into collisions, and that costs us money. And then there are malevolent people who take our cars and might do other things with them, not so well-meaning. But so that is that was the primary thing we had to solve. We had to solve for our loss. We're losing money when people are taking our cars. These impound costs and lawsuits and insurance costs, recovery fees, tickets, all these things add up, but they're extremely lagging indicators. Sometimes we don't even know what the final count is going to be 6 months afterwards. It can extend even into like 9 months. And if you're talking about lawsuits, it can be years. So while that's really important and we have to monetize and understand our metrics, it really doesn't help us move very quickly. So like, we don't come with a profit and losses line from finance. So like, we had to figure out what our position is and how we like can demonstratively and quickly impact the company's viability. So for example, like at our current scale, with loss costs per booking, so that's a thing we look at. So like, what was our total losses incurred, across from a trust and safety perspective per booking. So normalizes as we grow and scale up and down. In the 12 months that I've been here, we've been able to make a difference that adds up to about $500,000 a month. And for a company of our size, that is a huge deal. So we can dive more into how we got there. So like,
Too.
the significantly lagging indicator, 12 plus months. Like I can't roll into a WBR on Monday and say like, yeah, hey, we'll know in a year from now how things turned out. So we had to figure out what were our leading indicators. So what we ended up settling on, and we did a bunch of research, quantitative work to validate this, was late returns. Simply, is the car coming back on time? Did the person bring it back? And we'll know within hours. We set a certain parameter time. We kind of give it a little bit of a fudge room. So like, here's your return time. If it's not back by X, we now consider it a late return. People who aren't stealing your cars, who aren't going out and crashing them or committing crimes, they typically bring them back on time. Most folks are just trying to use a service, be responsible adults. Mm-hmm. So it's really simple. Car back on time, car not back on time. But it correlates astoundingly well to our loss costs. So we were able to look at back, 2 years worth of data and say, is this tracking or is this not tracking? And they followed each other perfectly. So we kind of settled on like, this is what we're going to look at. And I'm attacking this. Optimally, I'm solving this. So I'm attacking my late returns, but I'm solving our loss cost per booking. So now we have something I can track. I can look at it on a weekly cadence and understand, did we have a good week? Did we have a bad week? I can deep dive when things went poorly. What are the common indicators? And quickly have these response. And one of the things that's really nice about the speed of that turnaround is it also allows us to test and validate things quickly. Being able to iterate and try new things, going through testing. When we turn the switch on for a new feature, knowing did it work? And if we don't know if it worked for 3 months, like, we're dead in the water. I wouldn't even propose it as an engineering solution anyways. But if I can find out in a week, I can find out even in a few days if the thing is working or not. What that creates is kind of a Moneyball approach where you don't need to hit a home run every time. You get to like, hey, we just got to get on base. If we can make a 1% improvement this week, if we can make a 0.5% improvement this week, but we add up those 1% and those 0.5% over and over and over again, you end up with a huge demonstrative needle moving change that can completely change the narrative arc of your organization.
So would you say is it a good idea for someone in the trust and safety seat to, if they're, especially if they're looking for those leading metrics, to say, like, let's find all of the information that we can find and see where we can see a strong correlation between whatever that key lagging metric is, and try to find what's close to that and go after that first? Was that what you did? Is that the right way to think about that?
I mean, there were a lot of things all happening at the same time when I first got here. One of my kind of soapbox things is the name trust and safety. Like the very first word is trust. We have to earn the trust of my fellows. That I'm here to help. I'm here to move the needle. I'm here to work with you. I'm here to partner. So like just re-earning and regaining that internal trust within the organization that was my day one goal. Like I was like, okay, I'm giving myself 60 days to regain the trust of everyone inside of this organization, so that when I approach, and it's simple human mechanics, like Brooks, if we've been friendly, we've worked together, and I've helped you, when I come to you with a problem, you're more likely to help me. And it's not meant to be selfish and self-serving. It's just human, it's just human interaction. It's like when we work together and we've built that trust, we know that things are going to work a lot better. And, one of the things that was, I can't take away what the people were already doing inside of Avail when I got here. We'd hired a brilliant business intelligence engineer. And then one of my key partners from the insurance side, Mallory Grimm, I have to give her the biggest shout out I possibly can. Because when I make a wave in trust and safety, it eventually becomes a wake in insurance. So anything that goes wrong on my side becomes her problem. So we really kind of joined efforts saying like, hey, in theory, we aren't on the same team, but all of our problems become the same thing. So we worked together. She's our head of insurance strategy, and we worked on these problems together. And because of the movement in trust and safety, we were able to, attack these problems together, and I would say have a significant amount of success. So anything I've been able to accomplish, certainly I share a lot of the gratitude and success with her.
That's great. That's very practical shout out there. I like that a lot. And I'd love to dig even more into some of the practical things that you've experienced over the last year. What was your experience implementing all of these changes, and just thinking through like, okay, we've got to focus now on the right metrics. What did that actually look like within Avail?
Yeah, so I'll give, so when I arrived, Avail was, they had the gift of what I'll call the gift of desperation. They desperately wanted change. They wanted to see improvement. So they were a sponge. And when I showed up and I was like, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z, they were like, let's do it. There was no pushback. They were ready to jump. So, there was, I did not encounter resistance from our senior leadership team, our CEO. They were all on board with doing what needed to be done to make significant and immediate improvements to some of these risk and loss areas. So, that is something that I was granted as a gift. I didn't come into an organization that wanted to fight me. I came into an organization that was absolutely ready to let me run, and they wanted to see results quickly.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I would love to talk about what the results were of all of these changes as well. I know that you kind of hinted at the $500K a month. I would love to hear a little bit more. What happened after you kind of shifted the way you were thinking about trust and safety at Avail?
I think we became more, I would say, ops focused. So there was kind of, previously there'd been a lot of focus on, I don't want to say prevention. I'll say like business continuity, resiliency, withstanding external forces. And my pushback on that was that we had significant problems already inside. So we were trying to future-proof ourselves, but we had the problem already inside. So we needed to kind of like clean house inside first, and then push to some of those like more nebulous external forces that could impact Avail. So we like really just singled in on and attacked what I'll call our borrower vetting, and as is known in the trust and safety space, sometimes as the know your customer stack, KYC, like what do we know about these people that are coming into the door wishing to transact with us? And how do we make sure we're getting the right population into the cars and the wrong population not into the cars?
Yeah, there's a lot. I feel like there's a lot of things we can dig into there that would be super valuable. But maybe if we have time, we'll do that at the end. I'd love to hear a little bit more. But I'd also love to hear just about what it looked like to build a team at Avail. Kind of, you mentioned before, managing those internal stakeholders, relationships with them, is how incredibly important that is. And I think that's something that's on the mind of a lot of marketplace leaders when they hire maybe their first trust and safety hire. We've got a lot of early stage marketplace leaders who are listening. Is how do we build out this team well? Who are the right people to hire? I'm giving you a lot of questions here, but maybe just to start with, like, what are some key principles that you would give marketplace leaders for building out the right team for trust and safety?
Yeah, I think, obviously finding, so when you're initially building a trust and safety team, one of the things I won't say I would caution against, I would say is seek out generalists. There are going to be some brilliant fraud SMEs. There's going to be people who know OSHA upside down and inside out. Because again, that trust and safety stack is so big and so broad, and, risk mitigation and lawsuits, legal interaction. I mean, there's just so many things. As a result, you're probably not going to have a team of 15 SMEs who are all nicely bracketed into their subject matters.
Sure.
What you need is people who can be flexible and work across all those domains. So you're looking for just, people who are smart, scrappy. I think that trust and safety folks that have had previous operations experience where that cadence is like, I don't need an answer in 2 weeks. Like, I need an answer in the next, 5 minutes. There's just a different kind of quality to that sort of urgency that is going to exist in an early stage trust and safety organization. So finding people who can move and flex across, and then as you become more established and more entrenched, you're able to, dive into those, and those gaps are going to become recognizable. Ooh, we're having some issues with fraud. Let's find a fraud. Hey, we need some more, expertise in, I keep picking on OSHA, but OSHA safety and regulations. Like, let's find some of that. Those things will become self-evident as you grow and scale. But when you're launching off the ground, you got to get someone who's willing to just get it done, delivers results, even if they're not perfect. Kind of sticking with that like 70% launch mentality. Like, it doesn't have to be 100%. It has to be good enough, and then we'll learn and iterate as we go.
It makes a lot of sense. Hungry generalists is who to start with. And then
hungry that's
hungry
a great term.
generalist.
I was at a previous employer, and my previous boss described this as a place where overachievers go to feel bad about themselves. And like, that's okay. Like, you want people who are just relentless. And then when they hit that home run and they score the goal, I tend to use a lot of sports analogies, apologies. But when they do that, they're already like, what's the next one? Okay, we're on to the next play. We're now on to the next thing. If people just sit back and enjoy themselves, like, there's always another thing. Trust and safety is relentless. And you also want to find people who are relentless. And so when I joined Trust and Safety at Avail, I told the term internally that our motto was, we will bleeping fight you. And the concept isn't that we're fighting fighters, is that we're fighting people that have that kind of relentless spirit, that like, not willing to stop. And sometimes business is hard and it's not comfortable and it's a little ugly. And having those people, the type of folks that dig their heel in and say, no, it doesn't get past me. I will solve this. We're going to get an answer. That's who I want on my team. Because as a leader, if I can pass a problem off and know that this person's going to deliver a solution, it allows me to go attack the next problem instead of worrying about theirs.
Sure. That's really good. I think it's really important, especially in early companies, to be hiring people who have fight, like you're saying, people who are, I like to say go-getters. But I'd also like to hear maybe what would be some things to avoid when building out a trust and safety team? Are there things you're you're looking for, but you're saying, actually, but I don't want this. This is what I'm looking, hoping you don't have. That's what I'm looking.
I don't know if I have a standing list of things that I'm trying to avoid. One of the things that does, I'm trying to not offend anyone, when I see someone with the alphabet soup after their name, they're part of these 7 different security societies and this safety group and all these. It's not that those are a bad thing. It's that sometimes those ethoses and those schools of teaching can create a certain type of thinking that results in a certain rigidity. And in an early stage startup, the last thing you need is rigidity. So like I've hired people with the alphabet soup after their name. I've absolutely done it. I've also had interviews go very poorly with those type of folks because they're very entrenched in a certain type of way. It always must be done this in this pattern, in this way. And it's like, well, we're a startup. We gotta, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be running. And so that is something that kind of causes a little bit of a red flag for me. Of course, it gets vetted out in, solid interviewing, but, again, not having entrenched ideas, remaining flexible and willing to do. I've dabbled in marketing here. I've helped our engineers. Like I've done everything, and it's not meant to be self-promoting. It's just what it takes. What does the business need, and being willing to jump in.
Yeah, I think like the good foundation for that is just humility. Like, if you got hungry, you got humble. I think those are 2 really important qualities you're looking for in people, especially like flexibility you have to have, and you can't be flexible if you're not humble. You have to be willing to learn and grow. I think that's really important. So one other area I wanted to go into with you here, Drew, is how to get more value from your vendors. So I think that the entire world of trust and safety is fraught with incredible amounts of vendors. And at an early stage, you may have to pick and choose which vendors you can afford to work with, what your priorities are. And then you get to these large stage marketplaces, and they've got dozens and dozens of vendor relationships they're managing. And there's a lot of purpose behind all of those. I think it's not, I really don't like the model there. I think it's not good, but I would love to hear then, since we've got all of these vendor relationships to manage, how do we actually get value out of them? How do you manage that? Because that's part of the job of the trust and safety person, is to get that. So what do you have any thoughts around how to do that and how you've done that at Avail?
Yeah, in trust and safety, broadly is typically are teams that are highly leveraged, and we are having to use these vendors to bring us information we don't know, or to provide products and services we can't do ourselves. Very, 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 very common. And so I'll set you up for this, Brooke. So far at Avail, our specific leading indicator, we've been able to improve about 88%. So we've seen an 88% reduction in our deleterious leading indicator. Now, the trick question is, how many vendors did we change or switch in order to facilitate that improvement? And the answer is 0.
Yeah.
And then, it's like, so a lot of folks see their vendors. It's just make sure you don't see them just purely as transactional. And there is basis for that to some degree. Like I give you money, you give me X, and it's true. But there's a lot more down the road if you're able to build those partnerships with those vendors. So like, again, Drew here. Hi, I'm the head of trust and safety for Avail Car Sharing. My purview's big. I've got OSHA, risk management, and law enforcement relations, building out our vetting protocols, operational trust and safety. Like we have people in the field. I have to make sure that they're safe, as well as being the primary point of contact for 6 different risk vendors. Like that's a lot on the plate. So, and the point of that is that I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in utilizing any one of those single vendors. But here's the good news. They are. So it is not just to see it as a transaction, but to see it as a partnership. So when I joined Avail, like there were some of the vendors we hadn't talked to in, a long time. So we got onto, some of them were even a weekly cadence. Some of them were biweekly, some of them were monthly, some of them were even weekly. What are we doing? What are we not doing well? And then really started to try to build that like 2-sided accountability, as I call it.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to go into what 2-sided accountability is then, actually. It's a great concept. The phrase 2-sided is pretty common here in the marketplace space, but I'd love to dig into what 2-sided accountability means.
Yeah. So again, this is pushing us away from that purely transactional type of relationship with the risk vendors. So it's like, we'd first meet with a vendor and I'd say like, hey, I don't know anything about you yet. Like, let's meet and greet. And then let's start getting into, it's like, and learning, like, is there something we could be doing better? There's something like, are we not passing you the right information? Is there something you're sending us and we're not taking advantage of? And one of my favorite ones is like, if you were me, what would you change? And that last question there has invited some fantastic operational, implementable, actionable changes that we've made here at Avail, saying like, hey, if you were doing this, what would you do? And they're like, well, your action map is a little weird. And if you flip those two things, you're going to get a different result. And I think that would be like fantastic answers. They're the subject matter experts. Let them be that, rather than simply passing them money and collecting information. So it's opening that critique, opening that door to say like, how can we be better? And it also builds trust. It builds that trust you're having with those individuals, because at the end of the day, yes, they're a business, but they are also people that operate that business. So it gets us two things. First, we already discussed, like, I'm not a SME, and it invites them in to give you that feedback, and allows the people who know more than anyone else in the world how to use their platform to help us use their platform. It's a win-win. And second, like, once you've accepted that critical feedback, it really adds weight into when I express concern or I have an issue. And again, it gets into that like human nature. If Brooks, you've been able to like help grow me and critique me, and then say, hey, Brooks, I actually think it'd be better if it would help us, if it's going to result in a much better reaction than if it was purely just that transaction, or sometimes even adversarial relationship that you'll see sometimes with vendors. So it gets more help and it adds value to the relationship. So, and again, not intended to be purely self-serving. It's just human nature. Like, when we open ourselves up, the other person typically will too, and it makes it a better and more value-added relationship.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'd love to sum that up by just saying, if you had to give some advice to other leaders, whether they're trust and safety leaders or just marketplace, like C-level leaders, on how to get more from their vendors while reducing potential risks, how would you boil that down? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I would start with, like we said earlier, be humble. Like, I don't, we use a company that helps provide us motor vehicle reports. What is this person's past driving history? When I was an officer, I just clicked a name and date of birth and boop, it popped up for me. But I don't know how to use it practically and to know your customer stack, how we're vetting. Is it adding points? Is it a risk model? How are we doing it? Is there an algorithm we use? I don't know that. I can let them help me learn that. And so just being humble and asking like, I don't know, help me learn. Brooks, I don't know if you have a specific hobby or something you're really, really, really good at. But if I ask you about it, you're going to love to talk about it. So when you ask people who are good at something, they're gonna be excited. They're going to tell you all about it. And it's not purely just a sales pitch. Like, it's what they're good at. It's their domain. So you're opening that opportunity to let the people who know more about it help you execute in a great way. And is to not rush to get rid of a risk vendor. There's a desire to make a quick and impactful change. It doesn't necessarily mean you have the wrong people in the room. It may not be that you're using them in the right way. And you're going to now throw out any past relationship you had and have to start over. So rebuilding sometimes can be much faster, more effective than starting fresh. Sure. So don't throw the baby out with bathwater. Work with the risk vendors you've got. And if it just isn't working, by all means, cross-shopping is completely normal and acceptable. But take your time and don't jump to any quick conclusions.
That's great, man. Drew, this has been really, really helpful. And to start bringing it to a close, I kind of ask a couple questions of all of our guests. And the first one is, if you're thinking through all of the stuff we talked about today, which honestly, if you go back and listen to the last 30 minutes, it's been a lot of stuff packed in a really short period of time. If you had to go through all of that and say, this is the one takeaway I hope no one forgets, I hope marketplace leaders take this away, what would that one takeaway be?
Well, I'm gonna play it up, and I'm gonna give you two. So I'm gonna
Perfect.
divide it. So, you know, I love the saying that if you aim for nothing, you'll hit it every time. So you'll notice in this podcast and this discussion, I talk a lot about ethos and mentality, and what is the intent and what is the direction. Some places will refer to it as your North Star, or like your core tenets. I talk about those things a lot because I think they're super, super, super important, especially for trust and safety. Because trust and safety is this proximal, like, we aren't morality, but we're trying to help enforce it for the business to, have optimal outcomes and treat our customers well and have them earn trust. So being specific with your intentions and your ethos is really, really important. That also what that helps you do. So it make sure you're moving the right direction. Um, if you as a leader or as a business person have never felt like you're flailing, you're probably lying. There's been those moments where you're like, am I moving the right direction? But if you are specific with your intent, your tenets, your North Star, like, even if you are flailing around a little bit, you're going to be moving the right direction if you're very intentional. And so you kind of get to that, like, don't confuse movement with progress. So as long as you've got your nose trained at that North Star, you're moving the right direction. So, like, first is, kind of that very nebulous ethos and intent and concepts, is have those things dialed in for yourself, for the people working for you, and then maybe even most importantly, for your leaders above you. So they know this is what we're doing. These are our core concerns. This is what we're working on. And then once you know those core tenets, attack the problems. They're going to come up fast. They're going to come at you, and don't shy away from them. Like, move to the problem. What I found in early stage business anywhere is a problem pops up and you're like, I got to go solve that problem. Well, that problem's actually like problem G, and you've got to work through problem A, B, C, D, E, F before you can actually,
Right.
you've got to solve, 6 other problems before you can solve the core problem that you're actually trying to get to that day or that month. So, like, don't be surprised when problems, I call them problems that fight back. Like, they almost have this own sentient level where, like, as much as you're trying to get to and bring resolution, it just keeps pushing against you, and is to stay relentless, keep attacking, solve all the miniature problems that you need to get up to the big one. And it is never easy. It's never easy. That's why they hire us. But doing it the right way will help you build significant, lasting solutions that will scale well.
That's great. All right, and my last question, outside of everything we've talked about, so putting aside the last 30 minutes, if you had to give one big piece of advice to marketplace leaders, even outside of trust and safety, what would you say to them? What's that one big piece of advice?
I would say, I'm going to try not to give you two answers again, but, like, stay flexible and take ownership. So, like, no problem isn't your problem. What keeps your boss up at night? If it's a marketing problem, help them. Like, again, I'm a trust and safety person. If it's a marketing problem, I'm going to help them solve that marketing problem, because that is the problem that they're facing. So stay flexible, continue to own it. And it's very rare in a smaller early stage startup that you're going to have everyone in place with all their subject matter expertise that can tackle this problem. It doesn't matter. Go out, be high functioning, be relentless, be plucky. Like I can solve marketing problems. Like, I am not a marketer, but I can go do it. And so just remain flexible, take ownership, and just be, if you have to be a SME, just be a subject matter expert in problem solving.
That's really good. And all of this has been really, really insightful, really helpful. I can't imagine that any person who's leading a marketplace could listen to this and then walk away and think, I don't have anything to change or implement in my business today. I can't imagine that. This has been really helpful. I love hearing about Avail Car Sharing as well. Avail is really such a great marketplace, and I'd love to be able to send people their way, whether it's people to bump up their customer side, or just to learn about them and maybe connect with some people. So I'm going to link to Avail their LinkedIn profile so that you can go follow them, listeners, and to their website to go check them out. And then I'm also going to link in the show notes to Drew's LinkedIn. Definitely go and follow him. Keep up with the stuff that he's doing and where he's at. I think that'd be really valuable for you. Drew, is there anything else that I could link to in the show notes for you?
I think that covers it. I'm here to support and promote Avail. We're doing super exciting things. I'm really we're absolutely on the rocket ship. We've seen explosive growth over the past 3 to 4 months, and finally really starting to get our teeth into where we feel like we should be. And that's seeing that come to fruition is as exciting as it is intimidating. When you see, 50, 60% growth over a few months period, which I think is not unreasonable in an early stage startup. But it still is, it's exciting, a little intimidating, but we're excited to, continue to tackle those challenges, and grow and, hopefully take over the world someday.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Drew. I can't be more grateful to have you on, and you're welcome to come back anytime you'd like to. Thanks for sharing with us. Listeners, thanks for joining us. Your attention and community that you've take part in it with Rockin Your Marketplace is incredible, and we're really grateful for that. So thank you. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.